So, I know I didn't do the whole your dating preferences are discriminatory video by Riley, just sort of because everybody else had done that video and I was busy with other stuff at that point. Now, Riley's basically starting to backpedal and trying to make excuses for what he did. This is basically damage control, the video. So, yeah, I'm gonna respond to the Riley Dennis video. Are genital preferences transphobic? So this should be fun. And let's get into the video.
Recently on the internet, there's been a lot of discussion around genital preferences and transphobia. In this video, I'm going to use the word cissexism instead of transphobia, but they're really similar words. At its most basic, cissexism means prejudice or discrimination against transgender people.
Okay, so regarding the words cissexism and transphobia, even though transphobia is a word that was sort of almost coined, I may be wrong about this, but it just seems like it was coined by SJWs, and it's been most frequently used by SJWs. It is a legitimate term. There is such a thing as transphobia. It is a legitimate phenomenon. But then the whole term cissexism is just very cringy and unnecessary. If we already have the word transphobia, why do we need the word cissexism? It makes no sense. The whole word cis, anyway, isn't even that necessary. Yes, in some contexts it's useful, but normally you can just say not trans, and then the whole sexism part of it, what does that have to do with sexism? I don't get why sexism is a word other than it just being another buzzword that SJWs can throw out and call you. So, I don't understand why there's a necessity for that word. Why can't you just say transphobia? Of course, in incidences where there's actual transphobia, I don't think anything that Riley's going to be talking about actually constitutes transphobia.
So what's been happening is that some people are making the argument that it's not cissexist at all to only be attracted to people with one kind of genitals.
And that's somehow wrong. Riley, you do realize that's the basic fundamentals of how human sexuality works. I mean, you claim to be a lesbian, right? Even though you're just a straight guy. Let's just admit it, you're just a straight guy. So, you only like vagina. That's fine. Why are you placing judgment on other people, then, if you only like vagina? The hypocrisy on this level is just so mind-boggling.
For example, these people might argue that being attracted to only women with vaginas in no way negatively affects trans people. On the other hand, I would argue that it's more complicated than that. We all have our implicit biases built into our preferences, and gender isn't as simple as just the genitals you have.
Okay, let's break that down. First of all, Riley says we all have our implicit biases built into our preferences. Yeah, maybe in some individual cases, I wouldn't say implicit biases necessarily. Maybe you were, I don't know, you dated a blonde girl and it turned out she was totally a crazy psycho and now you don't want to date blonde girls. Something like that could happen, maybe. But you're basically saying people can control their sexuality because they all have implicit biases, and that's what informs their preferences, not the way that their brains are wired to be attracted to people. No, it's all implicit biases. That's all it is. And then the other part, gender isn't just as simple as the genitals you were born with. Usually it is. Yes, in rare cases there are transgender people, but usually the genitals you're born with is your gender. Sorry about that, Riley. That's just the way it is. You always act like cis people are some other. You act like there's some distant people who you can just look down upon and not have to worry about. But they're 99.7% of the population, Riley.
After I say that, I usually get a bunch of blatantly cis-sexist responses, so I thought I'd address all of those responses at once. Number one, you're being homophobic. In this argument, I often get accused of homophobia, lesbophobia, or lesbian erasure by lesbians who believe that I'm trying to change their sexual orientation or identity. They say that my language sounds a lot like a dude who tried to turn them straight, or like conversion therapy.
That is a lot what your language sounded like in the video that you're damage controlling. You said that lesbians are well known for not liking penis and gay guys are well known for not liking vagina. And you're like, well, people are more than just their genitals. Why you like that? That was exactly what you were doing. You were being not just homophobic, but also, I guess, heterophobic. You're basically being discriminatory against anyone who just likes one set of genitalia. Because you're saying that they should like both because it's about the person and not their genitalia. Genitalia doesn't matter in your sexual attractions, which is, of course, just a ridiculous statement to make. So yes, you are being homophobic, Riley. You really are. You're undermining the gay and lesbian narrative. That's what you're doing. So stop with this whole damage controlling, stop with this whole backpedaling. That is what you did in your video.
Those responses are rooted in cis-sexism. This is because I'm not telling lesbians that they can't be lesbians. If you're a woman who only likes women, go ahead, identify as a lesbian.
Notice how he said women who only likes women and not women who only likes vagina. So he's saying that basically to be a lesbian, you have to like both quote-unquote cis women and trans women. Most lesbians are not going to be interested in trans women. I'm sorry. It's just how it is, Riley. I'm sorry.
But some women have penises, and if the fact that some lesbians might be attracted to those women offends you, it's because you don't think trans women are real women.
Okay, this is a straw man. Nobody is making the argument that, oh, I'm uncomfortable that a lesbian is dating a trans woman. I don't want to consider that a lesbian relationship, blah, 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 blah. Nobody's making that argument. What you're saying is that lesbians should not only date women with vaginas, they should expand their preferences to date trans women as well. That was what you were saying, which is homophobic.
That's because these accusations of homophobia make it sound like I'm trying to convince lesbians to like men, but I'm not.
So the way he's wording things is that he's saying, oh, I'm not trying to convince lesbians to like men. You're convincing them to like penis, Riley, which really isn't that much different. You're convincing them to like penis, and they don't like penis. Yeah, some of them may be willing to date a trans woman who has a penis, but most of them won't. You just can't accept this in your head, and I don't know why. You just can't accept this, which is homophobic. The whole point, the whole reason why a lot of these women are lesbians is because they only like vagina. It's not just because they like women emotionally. That's just how it goes. I'm sorry, really, what else am I supposed to say? That's just how their brains are wired. That's why they're lesbians.
I'm trying to show that preferences for women with vaginas over women with penises might be partially informed by the influence of a cis-sexist society.
No, that's how their brains are wired. That is literally just how their brains are wired. Like, where's the evidence that the reason why lesbians who don't like trans women do so because they're somehow discriminatory against trans women? No, it's just because they don't like their genitalia. That's it. That's it. That's the only reason. And that's a perfectly valid reason. Like, Riley, why are you harping on this? Seriously, man.
You do not have to like men. You do not have to date men or have sex with men. And if you think that's what I'm arguing, you're simultaneously strawmanning my argument and implying that trans women are men.
No, Riley, you're strawmanning your own straw man right here. You're not arguing that lesbians have to date men necessarily. You were arguing that lesbians have to date trans women who have penises. That was what you were arguing. Lesbians, for the most part, are not attracted to trans women who have penises. I'm sorry that offends you, ironically. You were going, oh, are you so offended that some lesbians like trans women? No, you're the one who's offended that a lot of lesbians don't like trans women. I'm sorry, Riley, that's just the way it is. Look, I have no other explanation. That's just the way their brains are wired.
Number 2, you're upholding rape culture.
It's funny how he made like this video about how, oh, this is how you can fight rape culture on college campuses. And then he makes this video like, you have to have sex with the person who you're not attracted to, which sounds a lot like rape. I'm being serious right here. The mindset that Riley is arguing sounds very predatory. It sounds a lot like rape, because he is saying that you have to have sex with somebody who you're not okay with having sex with. He's basically shaming you into having sex with someone. He's coercing you into having sex with someone. So maybe that's not technically rape, but it's very close. He's saying, like, you have to have sex with somebody or you're a bigot. That's what he's saying, which sounds a lot like rape. It honestly does.
This is honestly the worst response that I've heard, and probably the most cis-sexist one.
How is that quote-unquote cis-sexist or transphobic at all? That's literally the mindset you're arguing. It's very, very rapey. It's very scary that you think it's okay to shame people into having sex with people they don't want to have sex with. Would you be okay if, for example, let's just say a guy and a girl are in a relationship and they haven't had sex yet, and they've been in a relationship for a while, and the guy really wants to have sex, and the girl doesn't feel ready yet. And the guy keeps pressuring the girl, like, if you really loved me, you would have sex with me. Why don't you love me? You have to have sex with me. On and on and on. And the girl's like, no, I don't want to have sex with you. I don't feel ready yet. And the guy just keeps going like, okay, I guess you don't love me then. And eventually the girl kind of gives in. She's not really ready for it. She's not really happy about it. But she does consent and has sex with him. Now, that's not necessarily rape, but that is abusive. And that is a very blurry line, very rapey kind of mindset. That's basically what you're pushing. You're pushing pressuring somebody into having sex like that. Because by your standards, people can just go like, you should have sex with me or else you're a bigot. You should have sex with me or else you're a bigot. And then somebody goes no, and they're like, okay, you're a bigot then. That's what you're advocating, Riley. If you're not advocating the situation that I outlined before with like an abusive relationship like that, then why are you okay with the mindset of you have to be okay with having sex with someone or you're a bigot? Riley, how do you not see how that's a very dangerous, very abusive, very reminiscent of rape mindset? And how is that transphobic in any way?
That's because trans women have a long history of being accused of being rapists by cis women. It's the logic behind bathroom bills that prevent trans women from using the right bathroom. It's why some cis women are terrified of the idea of sharing a locker room with a trans woman. This is a very common tactic used by anti-trans folks to discredit trans women as just men trying to invade women's spaces so they can rape them.
So there is some truth to what he said. There are some people who do think that trans women are men in dresses who have come to rape people, but it's not like the majority societal perception of trans women. That is just not the case. So that's the first point I wanted to address. The second one is that he said that's why cis women are terrified of sharing a locker room with a trans woman. No, the reason why cis women don't want to share a locker room with a trans woman is usually because they don't want to see your penis. That's honestly why. If you're a trans woman, if you haven't had surgery yet, you're going to have a penis, and cis women are going to be uncomfortable seeing that. That's just the way it goes. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes. I wouldn't even feel comfortable changing in front of a bunch of cis men because I'm very, very self-conscious. And I'm sure a lot of trans women feel the same about changing in front of cis women. So it's like a lose-lose situation for everyone. It doesn't make sense that trans people who at least haven't had sex reassignment surgery yet, it doesn't make sense that they should be in the same locker rooms as the sex that they're transitioning to. Even though a lot of trans people themselves would be uncomfortable with that, no, just let them be in the locker rooms. Anyway, I went off on kind of a tangent there, and you're detracting from the argument. You really are, Riley. You are. The argument wasn't, oh, you're trans, which you're not, Riley. It wasn't, oh, you're trans, therefore you're gonna rape someone. No, it was the mindset you were advocating is very reminiscent of rape. And it's probably the sort of mindset that people who are actually rapists use to pressure people into sex.
Even if this is not your intention when bringing this up, this is what you are implying, and
the majority of people who are arguing that we're not arguing that it was, oh, trans women have come to rape cis women in bathrooms. That was not the intention. The intention of that argument is you are saying that it is okay to pressure someone into having sex with someone who they do not want to have sex with, which is a very creepy, reminiscent of rape mindset. I am sorry, Riley. That is what you're advocating. That is what people are arguing that you're advocating.
it is where this argument comes from. Suggesting that trans women are rapists for wanting to be fully recognized as women is extremely harmful. And I should note that I'm not saying you have to do anything without consent. I'm a big fan of affirmative consent, and you should never feel pressured to have sex with somebody.
Oh, there's no pressure there except that you'd get called a bigot for not having sex with somebody just because they're trans or whatever. No pressure there. There's absolutely no pressure there. Yeah, Riley, you're totally not for pressuring people and having sex, obviously.
This isn't about an individual. This is not saying you have to have sex with a trans woman or you're cis-sexist.
That's pretty much exactly what you argued in your video, and you're not really arguing anything that would indicate that you've changed your position on that, Riley. That's literally what you said. You said that it's discriminatory to not date a trans person in your past video. That is what you said. So stop with this backpedaling, stop with this damage control. Admit that's what you said. That is what you said.
It's saying that you should examine the societal influences on your preferences. There's a massive difference between honing in on individual scenarios and considering wider societal issues and attitudes.
So you're saying that this should be applied to all society, that all society should just go, maybe I should actually have sex with somebody I don't want to have sex with, because otherwise I'm a bigot. You're making it even worse. You're saying, like, no, I'm not trying to police your individual life. I'm just trying to police everybody in society's life. Yeah, great job, Riley. Great job.
Number 3, I'm allowed to have my preferences. Technically, you're right. You're allowed to have your preferences and you don't have to change anything. But there's more to it than that, and ignoring the deeper issues by stopping at a surface level analysis doesn't do this issue any justice. Like, you're allowed to have a lot of things. You're allowed to have prejudice towards trans people, but that doesn't mean you should.
Technically, it's not like that's just a basic human right that you should be able to express yourself however you want to express yourself. Jesus, how authoritarian are you, Riley? You're allowed to have prejudice towards trans people. I'm not saying that you should have to date a trans person. You're allowed to be transphobic if you want. Fuck you, Riley. Fuck you. Honestly. The only trans person who I would be comfortable dating would be a trans woman who has had sex reassignment surgery. That's just my personal preference. Because I don't like penis and I don't like men. That's just me. So even I, as a trans person, have my own preferences, and it's not because society this, society that. No, it's because it's the way my brain is wired. The fact that you think that the reason that somebody is not attracted to a certain set of genitalia is because of society, that's so backwards. That's so messed up. Even homophobic people who think that being gay is a choice or whatever, even people who think like that understand that straight people can't control who they're attracted to. Even those people understand that. And yet, you can't understand that. The fact that you're calling everyone who even has the slightest preference, who's not willing to date like all trans people or all people that said minority group, that you're calling them bigots? Riley, come on. Do you even understand what you're saying here? I'm so angry at you right now, Riley. Honestly, man.
So if we look a little deeper into this issue, there's the possibility of your genital preferences being at least somewhat partially informed by growing up in a cis-sexist society. There's also the fact that a preference is different than saying you would never do something. Like, having a preference for tall girls is fine, but refusing to date anyone under 5'7" is ridiculous. And obviously that's not a perfect analogy because short girls as a group don't face the societal marginalization that trans women do. But I'm interested in having a conversation about labels and implicit bias and trans-inclusive language.
What if you're just not into short girls? What if they just don't trigger the wiring in your brain that makes you attracted to someone? I mean, I get if somebody's like, I will never date somebody under 5'7", even if they're really hot. Like, yeah, that would be stupid. But that's not how people's attractions normally go. Most people don't necessarily have hardline rules. They're just attracted to who they're attracted to. I mean, genitals are one of the exceptions to that, just because that's something that's very, very hardwired. Even so, what if you're just not attracted to girls under 5'7"? Whatever, you will never ever be attracted to one in your life. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have an open mind, of course not. But what if you're just not attracted to them? And you're saying, oh, short girls don't face marginalization in our society like trans women. What does that have to do with marginalization in society? That has literally nothing to do with marginalization in society. People's attractions, people's individual attraction, have nothing to do with people's marginalizations in society. I don't even know where he's getting this from.
Simply saying, it's my preference, end of discussion, is a good way of sidelining all of those issues and instead centering the feelings of cis people in a discussion that's about trans people.
No. It's literally just your preferences. That's usually the only things that come into factor. The answers to this are so obvious. It's literally just your preferences. This has nothing to do with cis people or trans people. It's just the way people are naturally attracted. It's just the way it goes.
Number 4, I have a trans friend who says this is okay. People love their tokens. I've done an entire video on moral licensing and why this is a terrible defense, but in summary, you'll always be able to find trans people to back up your cis-sexist views. You'll always be able to find gay people who spout anti-gay rhetoric. You can even find people of color who openly advocate racist policies.
What do you consider transphobic? What do you consider homophobic? What do you consider racist? Because usually the things that you consider transphobic, homophobic, or racist are not transphobic, homophobic, or racist. I'm sorry. And I know exactly, like, the people he's talking about. He's talking about Blair White. He's probably talking about Milo Yiannopoulos. He's probably talking about Sky Williams, too. Who knows? It's true that, yes, there are minorities of people who do advocate, like, there are some gay people who are against gay marriage or something to that effect. But the majority of trans people who disagree with the main trans narrative, or gay people who disagree with the main gay narrative, or black people who disagree with the main black narrative that's out in society these days, those people are by no means racist against their own race, or racist in any capacity, or whatever the other ists that he's talking about. They just don't agree with SJWs. That is literally all they are. They just disagree with SJWs. They just disagree with that narrative. They're not discriminatory in any way at all. They just disagree with that narrative. It's funny how you claim to be fighting this crusade for trans rights because you just dismiss all the trans people who have a different opinion than you, which is pretty transphobic in my opinion.
That doesn't make you right.
No, but it does mean that you're exposed to different perspective that goes against the narrative.
Having a trans friend doesn't mean you're suddenly an expert on trans issues. People often internalize negative ideas about their own identities and regurgitate them with passion. I've met gay men who told me that their homosexuality was a sin and that their punishment was to be celibate for their entire lives. And even still, they'd probably go to hell. Obviously, that would be anti-gay for any straight person to say, and it's also not okay for gay people to advocate that. In the same way,
so you're comparing gay men who think that their homosexuality is a sin to trans people who understand that other people have preferences, how are those by any means equivalent? Yes, obviously saying that homosexuality is a sin and you should go to hell for it is homophobic even if you're gay yourself in saying it. But saying that people just have preferences and that is the way they are born is not transphobic by any stretch of the imagination. You're making so many false equivalences, Riley. I can't believe it.
If trans people are saying cis-sexist garbage, it's still cis-sexist garbage.
The trans people saying, oh, it doesn't matter that somebody isn't attracted to me because that's just a preference. They're not into trans people. Like, how is that transphobic? How is that transphobic by any stretch of the imagination at all? Like, I understand that probably a vast majority of the population isn't into trans people, and that sucks, and I wish that wasn't the case. But that's the way it is. That's just the way it is. Should gay people be whining about how the majority of the population are straight, and it's harder for them to find boyfriends or girlfriends because of that?
And look, there are cis people who are on my side as well, so if you think it's okay to point to your token trans friend, then I can just point to my token cis friend. Number 5, I'm triggered by penises because of past sexual trauma. That's completely understandable. I've never said that anyone should have to have sex with someone with a penis if they don't want to. If intimacy with someone who has a penis is triggering for you, I would never suggest that you have to do that.
So, lesbians should date women with penises, except if they've been traumatized. So the only exception is if you've been traumatized. So I bet there's going to be a ton of lesbians claiming they've been traumatized at this point. Like, it's just funny how much damage control he's doing. Like, even he realizes that that video that he did was awful. And he somehow still manages to maintain the very points that made that video awful while trying to do this awful sort of damage control. The lack of self-awareness is amazing.
Take your time to heal and work through your trauma at your own pace. Just be aware that the majority of people making the I could never date someone with a penis argument are not doing so because of trauma or triggers.
So he's saying, okay, but if you're not traumatized, you still have to date someone with a penis. He does not understand how sexuality works at all. Obviously he hasn't because of his complete ignorance of biology, but have you been to middle school, man? Do you know how biology works? People are born with wiring in their brain that determines their sexuality, determines what kinds of genitals they like. I'm sorry, that is the way they are born. There is science to back this up. The way the hormones interact with the brain at birth determine whether you're gonna grow up gay or straight or bi. That's just how it works. How can you sit there and claim that gay people exist, that bi people exist, that straight people exist, that whatever sexuality that you want to make up exists, and then refute the idea that anybody has any sort of sexual orientation at the same time? You keep undermining the LGBT narrative. That's all you do. That's all you do. Which makes me sometimes wonder whether you're a troll. I mean, although I know it's unlikely. It honestly does make me wonder whether he's a troll. Because he's saying that gay people and straight people can't exist because there's no such thing as genital preferences, apparently, and that trans people can't exist because there's no such thing as biological sex, apparently.
So that is all of the typical responses I could think of. The first two responses in particular come from TERF, radfem, and gender-critical ideologies, which are all proudly anti-trans. Even if you don't consider yourself a part of those movements, you're siding with them when you use their arguments. Their entire platform is cis-sexist, and their arguments reflect that. So even if you say you believe trans women are women, it doesn't do a whole lot of good if you're still completely siding with folks who don't believe that trans women are women. And the last thing I want to say about this is that if you'd rather not have sex with a woman who has a penis, maybe just don't make such a huge deal of it. Trans women are often afraid of not being found attractive or desirable after coming out, and you're not helping. If you really want to be an ally to trans people, you could just not talk about it. And by that, I'm not trying to censor you, okay? So don't pretend this is censorship. You have the freedom to say whatever you want. I'm just asking you to consider if it's necessary to say those things when they reflect harmful or violent rhetoric. Because if you have an opinion that you know is only going to make people feel bad about themselves, why constantly share it with the world? It's fine to not find people attractive, but it's mean to constantly yell about how unattractive you find those people, especially when those people are oppressed.
So I know this was a really, really long ramble. Most of my videos, I feel like, have been way longer than they should be, because I have a tendency to ramble. Let me know if you like these longer videos, or if you'd like them to be more concise, and I will try my best to take your criticism into account. But as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.